All right, let's bring in our think tank tonight and talk about what happened today. Joining us in Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney Michael Bixon. In Los Angeles, California, criminal defense attorney Lara Uretzian. And in South Orange, New Jersey, media law professor, legal journalist Candace Kelly. Great to have everyone with us tonight. Great to see you. Happy New Year. What's going on here, Candace? Let me start with you. It seems like the gloves are off here, and the defense is going after this prosecutor.
They absolutely are, but we see what the prosecutor is doing here. He's looking for some glue on a case that just isn't that tight, and that was the issue here. He was in a situation where he's got two people. He hasn't charged them with murder yet, though I know we're going to be talking about that, but his case isn't as tight as he wants it. He has pushed the ethical boundaries and, as you mentioned, potentially making himself a witness. On the other hand, the attorney, Mr. Smith, why didn't he stop the process? There was the opportunity for him to do so too. Had I been in his position, I would have also recorded. But I would have also said, you know what, before making this even more of a mess with even more moving parts, let me jump in here and stop this. I am, in fact, Lori Vallow's sister's attorney, and that's why I'm here. So it was interesting to see how things played out, what did happen, and then at the end, what didn't happen on the part of Mr. Smith.
All right, Lara, what bothers you more here? The fact that a secret recording is made by one attorney of another attorney, or what is actually said on that secret recording?
Definitely what was said on the recording. I mean, it's a good thing that we have a recording, because otherwise it would have been a he said, or he said, she said. And I'm not really clear, honestly, if this was completely secret. I know he was talking about the phone being visible to everyone, and at some point might have been on the table. But putting that aside, what the prosecutor is doing truly bothers me as a criminal defense attorney. I mean, the one thing you don't want a prosecutor or anyone to do is to unduly influence a material witness in a case. And that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to get the witness to buy into his theory and cooperate with him and basically say what he'd like. He's trying to influence a witness, and that's not what a prosecutor is supposed to do. A prosecutor represents the people, represents everybody, including the defendant in reality. And they're supposed to ensure that the process is fair, that the defendant, just like anyone else that's participating in the proceedings, that the defendant gets a fair trial. And when you're trying to influence a witness, we all know that that defendant is not going to get a fair trial, and he's creating issues in this case. I mean, later on, depending on what happens with the case on appeal, this is something that can be raised later. Why take chances like that? Why not play it straight?
So, Michael, the attorney for Vallow's sister who made the recording told Mark Means, Lori Vallow's attorney, about it. Put yourself in his shoes. Someone gives you that recording. Would you be as aggressive as these defense attorneys are being? Is there another approach you would take? What would you do?
I think that they're absolutely taking the right approach here. I think that you could even take it a step further. I think later on we might see some motions to suppress. If any of these witnesses come forward to testify at a later point, I think they're definitely tainted witnesses. I mean, you have a prosecutor here who's not just relaying facts of the case, but he's arguing the case to them. And he's influencing how they're going to testify at a later point. He's talking about faith. He's talking about the death penalty. There's all sorts of undue things that are going on in this conversation. And thank God it was recorded. Because if it wasn't, we wouldn't have any idea of, exactly what was said and how it was said. And if it wasn't recorded, we would have just had to go off this one attorney's word. But now that it was, we can see exactly what this prosecutor was saying to these witnesses. And it becomes a question of how far has he taken it outside of what was recorded, outside of what we do know. And that's a very scary thing.
So, Lara, my question to you now is there are going to be other witnesses in this case, right? So the other ones probably didn't record any conversations that they had with investigators or with the prosecutor, or maybe they are, I'm not sure. Is there anything else, any other repercussion from this that could impact other witnesses and evidence in this case?
Of course. I mean, it's going to impact the credibility of any witness. If a jury hears any of this, they're going to start wondering what the investigators or the prosecutor, if the prosecutor got to interview these other witnesses, what this prosecutor told the other witnesses, how much of an influence he had on their stories, how much of their stories is really shaped by his theory and his pushing his idea of what is the truth in this case. Of course, it's a huge, huge problem. I mean, and I have to admit, I mean, it's a great thing for the defense to have, regardless of what happens with their motion, regardless of what the judge decides. Like you said, there are going to be some lasting repercussions. It's gonna make every other witness look like they were potentially unduly influenced by the prosecutor.
All right, when we come back,
Vinny,
go ahead, Candace, finish up.
well, Vinny, I just wanted to say that if the judge does decide in the favor of Rob Wood, well, then he should have other people do this type of work so that he keeps himself out of the equation. And that really is going to be the best solution if things are decided in his favor.
Yeah, and that was the strange thing about this, because he had investigators with him. So this was like the introduction before the interview, but it got very substantive. So it's like the interview. It was really, I've never heard anything quite like it. When we come back, we're going to hear
Smith
more
called
of
it
it.
a meet and greet.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, when we come back, we're going to listen to more of the recording, because some other things were revealed by the prosecutor, things that were never said publicly before, and gives us a better idea of their perspective of the overall case involving the death of those two children.
I'm just going to tell you right now, we are going to be filing conspiracy to commit murder charges against both Chad and Lori. And we're not shy about that. I've told their attorneys. His attorney keeps pretending like I've never said that. Whatever. But we have to. Yeah. We have to.
That was the prosecutor in the Doomsday Couple case talking about, yeah, they're going to be filing some conspiracy to commit murder charges against Lori Vallow-Daybell. We've all been wondering about this, right? For quite some time, because remember, they're not facing murder charges yet, but apparently that's where prosecutors are going. And the question is it going to be before or after the trial for the current charges? Let's bring back in the think tank. Michael Bixon, how do you see that issue playing out? I mean, do you think they go through with this trial, try to get convictions on these charges, and then down the road charge them with murder or conspiracy to commit murder?
It's possible. I mean, a lot of people, including myself, have been wondering, why haven't they? I mean, I think that they have enough probable cause to lay forth a case. Whether or not it's enough to secure a conviction, especially after what we've seen through all this, audio recordings, is a different story, but at least for a probable cause. And the question becomes, why are they just sort of hanging this over their head? I mean, everyone knows that, they're at least contemplating it. And it's not much of a surprise, even after hearing, it in the audio recording. But again, the question becomes, why haven't they? Because they very well could. But yeah, I do think they possibly could after. I think it should be brought with it, though, to make it more of a secure and proper case, though.
Yeah, I'm surprised, because we always talk about it like it's a murder case, but it's not a murder case. But one of the reasons may be is they don't have enough evidence. And they feel like they need just a little bit more, like maybe cutting a deal with someone. Take a listen to this part of the recording.
I'm sure kind of difficult knowing like they're asking for information that's going to help them in a case against your sister. But I guess the thing I want you to know is our whole goal is just justice for these kids, and our hope as it comes to it, your sister's actually made some overtures. She might be willing to talk to us.
I hope she does. I pray for that all the time.
We hope she does. Yeah. She actually was talking with Chad about talking to us before we found the bodies, just a few days before, and he talked her out of it, which is too bad. It would have been better for her to tell us.
That is amazing insight into this case that I didn't really know before, because we were wondering. But Candace, it seemed like there may have been a back and forth about to happen between Lori Vallow and prosecutors, with her getting the deal and Chad talking her out of it. I mean, can prosecutors be looking at this case that Chad Daybell is the big fish, not the mother of the children?
Yeah, in fact, the 18-minute tape also points out some things in terms of what Rob Wood said. And he says specifically that Chad Daybell really is the ringleader in all of this. So he revealed a lot in this tape. And really, it's about time. Like you said, what are they waiting for? The only thing that could be stopping this, because this is how we know that, of course, prosecutors work this way. They have the evidence and they bring the charges. So why aren't they bringing the charges? It's just not a sealed tight case. And that's probably why he was in this situation where he shouldn't have been, trying to figure out what are some things that I can pull from this next witness. So I think that there's some holes that have to be filled. And him doing this and being recorded, unbeknownst to him, kind of showed his hand. But it really is about time. And I think that there's enough probable cause and enough connecting of the dots to say, hey, we need to charge these two with murder. But clearly, Chad Daybell is the person that's being pointed as the ringleader in all of this.
Yeah, Lara, I look at it, and I'm sorry, but there's only one person who is the parent, the adult that is responsible for those two children. I don't understand how she is not the big fish. I mean, if I was the prosecutor, that's where my focus would be. You know, some people, sometimes they look at cases and you know, a parent and a child dies, and somehow, like, that's less of a crime. I can't understand it, but I get that feeling sometimes in some of these cases I cover. And here you've got two people. One is the mother of the children, and she's the one who gets the deal, potentially?
Well, she may be the weak link. She may be the one that they're hoping is going to break at some point. And you know that in this case, if the prosecutors thought that they had enough evidence, they would have filed the murder charges. You don't get to try this case several times. I mean, the facts are the facts. This is one incident, so they should be, whatever their strongest charges are, they're going to want to be, that's what they're going to want to put on. Those are the charges that they're going to file. Clearly, the murder, the conspiracy for murder, is not their strongest, and they need one of them to cooperate. They must have holes in their story. They can't put on a convincing story for a jury, and hence the pressure on whoever they think is the weakest link here. And it looks like they think Lori is, because she's considered it at least once or possibly twice, and Chad's the one who's convinced her not to cooperate. So, I mean, they're buying themselves time. It's very clear. They need more for this more serious charges, and clearly they don't have it. And I think early on in this case, I remember us talking about this, and we were talking about how they're waiting for one of them to crack. And it looks like they think Lori is the one.
Now, another one of the big themes in this case is going to be the LDS, and it plays in many different ways. But at one point, you know, the doomsday couple were LDS followers. Then they went off on this extreme tangent in their beliefs. But this also came up during this conversation, in this recording. And what you're going to hear is that recording, and then you'll hear the argument from the attorneys about Rob Wood using the word LDS speak.
I kind of want to give you that background. That's kind of the context we see this as. Like, this guy came in here, and, you know, again, I'm not making excuses for anyone, but kind of blew up this situation. Mm-hmm. And he did not care who died, mm-hmm. who got hurt. He did not care at all. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is, your sister truly believes that everything she's done has been done in righteousness.
I know.
And I know I'm kind of using LDS speak there.
Yeah, it's 100%. That's my interpretation also. Yeah. I think she 100%.
She believes it.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, you'll see kind of a little crack in like a jail phone call. Or she'll.
Well, you've heard our conversation, so you know that I get that she's not fully aware of what she's really done.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think she is.
I mean, I'm going to say it this way. I think she knows what she's done.
She knew enough to lie to us about it.
Yeah, but the context under which it was done was this religious, just these ideas that are out there. I can say this because I am LDS, like, no basis in the LDS faith. You said it in your phone call to her. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at.
Some of the elements that I want to go into is that Mr. Wood made reference to LDS speak and righteousness, invoking his religious beliefs to Miss Shiflett. You would agree with me that knowing Miss Shiflett, that would influence her in a certain way, right?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that Mr. Wood, being a former bishop of his church, invoking LDS speak and his religious beliefs, would have an impact on Miss Shiflett. You'd agree with that then, correct?
Again, religion's very important to Summer, and her membership in the church is very significant to her. That kind of a correlation was unnecessary in my mind to make that. Everybody knew that Rob was LDS and that he was Mormon, and I don't know if Summer knew that he was a bishop or not, and he didn't say that in this conversation. But again, that whole, hey, we're the same, we're on the same team here. We're, not only it just felt awkward and unprofessional to be talking that way.
All right, Michael Bixon, is that a problem, playing the LDS card?
Absolutely. I mean, look, if you hadn't told me that this guy was a prosecutor and he was an investigator, I would 100% believe you. I mean, I hear this all the time from police and from investigators who are questioning or interrogating witnesses or suspects or anything like that. And don't forget, in this context, as him acting really as an investigator, he could absolutely lie to her, just like police do. I mean, he's definitely working her as a witness, trying to get her more on his side. And we don't know for sure whether or not what he's telling her about Miss Vallow is the truth. He very well could be lying to her. Miss Vallow could actually be the main suspect, the main one that they want to go after. And he's just using Mr. Daybell sort of as a, not the scapegoat, but, saying, oh, yeah, we're really trying to go after him, but really her, just to try to flip her as a witness, to use her more. So, I see a whole lot of issues with the way that he's approaching this. But again, it sounds more like he's an investigator than a prosecutor from the way that he's talking to her.
Candace, I want to go in a different direction now. That word righteousness, when he said that she believed everything she was doing was under the guise of righteousness, I was thinking, wow, it almost sounds like he's making a defense argument for her state of mind, right? A mother that would allow something to happen to her children, but she's doing it because she thinks it's good for them. That's like the classic insanity defense in some states. I mean, to me, that was kind of shocking.
Yeah, you know what this reveals? This reveals the narrative that he intends, if he stays on the case, to create. And by many accounts, Lori Vallow, before she met Chad, was a loving, fun-loving mother who really cared for her kids. And then she met Chad, and all of a sudden she was under, she was mesmerized by him and really kind of lost her way and didn't know what she was doing. So I think that him laying out this whole idea of, being righteous and marrying everything to the church shows that he's trying to marry her state of mind to what was going on in the church and what Chad was feeding her. And I think that it's clear what we see, from what we see from the tape, that this is the way that he is going to go, which is why, as you mentioned, a potential plea deal might be being made with Lori, or there might have been some discussion because they have an out for her. She was someone who was in a cult. She was someone who didn't understand what she was doing. She didn't have the right state of mind to do what was in the best interest of her kids, because at one point she did, but post Chad, she did not.
When we come back, we're going to take you on the docket, a death penalty case that is scheduled to happen this month. Details straight ahead. On the docket tonight, a case out of Florida. The defendant's name is Andre Warner. Should sound familiar. We covered his trial last year right here on Court TV. But then the court shut down after the jury found him guilty of murder. Now we've got to move on to the penalty phase of the case, where the only issue is life or death. Chanley Painter has more for us.
Finally got justice. Finally.
The family of a young father from Auburndale, Florida, calls it an answered prayer.
He was the sweetest person you could ever think of.
On March 18th, the mother of Adam Hilaire watched through tears as the verdict was read.
As to count one, the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder of Adam C. Hilaire.
Andre Warner was convicted of shooting Hilaire, execution style, during a home invasion in August of 2016. John Hung, the victim's roommate, found his body the next day.
At first, I just thought they beat him up real bad.
The bloody discovery came only hours after Hilaire went on a date with this woman, Kaylee Bustos. She testified she lured the 27-year-old using the dating website Plenty of Fish.
I really don't care if I spend the rest of my life in prison, as long as he's behind bars too.
Their night at a bowling alley ended in conspiracy. Prosecutors say Warner, Bustos, and 2 other men, Joshua Ellington and Gary Gray, drove to Hilaire's apartment to rob him.
He was forced to his knees at gunpoint by his assailants, all while he was begging them for his life for the sake of his 5-year-old daughter.
Now, Warner's capital murder trial is at a standstill. The jury was set to return after the guilty verdict to decide his punishment, life in prison or the death penalty. But phase 2 of the trial was halted due to COVID-19 restrictions. And the jury that found him guilty won't decide his punishment. Judge Harb dismissed them at the request of Warner's defense team.
All rise.
Instead, a new jury will be selected to decide if Warner should be put to death for his crimes once the pandemic restrictions are lifted. It is unusual, but not unheard of.
What decision have you made?
To testify, yeah.
All right, and I've asked you if you're satisfied with that decision, and you told me yes, correct?
Very.
A new jury could view Warner's testimony in a different light if he takes the stand again. During his trial, Warner told jurors he wasn't even at the crime scene and pointed the finger at his co-defendants.
The only people that was there when they left, it was just me, Evelyn, and her brother, I believe, at the time.
When you say they left, who left?
Haley, Josh, and Gary.
Police found several caps stolen from Hilaire's collection in the backseat of Warner's car. Warner said he bought them from Bustos.
She told me that she met some dude that had a box of hats that was selling hats, and she ended up buying them.
All right, what did you do?
I asked her if she was trying to sell something because they were nice hats, or decent little hats. So I asked her if she was trying to sell some. She told me she was.
Okay, did you buy a hat? Or hats?
Yeah, I bought a couple of them.
Juror Cindy Bassford says Warner's testimony worked against him.
He actually hurt himself as far as myself being on the jury. When Andre was on the stand, he spoke of the baseball caps, and when he spoke, he said he had been given money from his girlfriend to buy the baseball hats. And at that point, I didn't find him believable.
When asked what sentence she would have imposed,
I was leaning toward life in prison.
The new jury could decide differently, but Hilaire's mom says she's got the verdict she wanted.
I'm already dying, but I have to forgive. I got to, because it's not going to do me any good. It's not going to do nothing good for my family either. So I got to.
So a brand new jury will come in and decide life or death for Andre Warner in this case. So it's kind of different. You know, usually it's the same jury that listens to the evidence during the regular course of the guilt phase of the trial. But now they're going to be hyper-focused on one issue and one issue only. Let's bring back in our think tank. Larry Uretzian, this happens once in a while, a lot of times in retrials. But here you have a jury that didn't listen to all the evidence during the trial, and now they just have this one decision to make. How different will this trial be?
Probably somewhat different, but I mean, the jury is going to have to hear some of the evidence. They're going to also, the facts of the case, but they're also going to hear mitigation. The way I see this case, I mean, it could go either way, but it only involves one person. Is it heinous? Yes. Is it tragic? Yes. But I could see, I mean, you could hear one of the jurors in the case already saying, the one who didn't even believe him and thought his testimony hurt him, Andre Warner's testimony hurt him. Even she said that she was leaning towards life imprisonment. So I my gut feeling is in this case, most likely they're not going to give him the death penalty. If it was a more horrific, I mean, it is horrific. I'm not trying to downplay it here. It's awful. I think the one fact that really, really hurts him is this man was begging for his life, and they were laughing about it later. That's not going to go very well with any jury that hears it. But at the same time, he testified. He was claiming that he wasn't there, and basically he's being set up by the other co-defendants. And I could see a jury basically saying, you know what, let him get life imprisonment, especially if the victim's mom is saying the same.
Candace, do you think this jury will get the full flavor? And obviously prosecutors have got to put in the evidence to explain to the jury what happened here. But it's one thing when you listen to the entire case from start to finish and you are embedded. Do you think this jury will understand what happened and why this man was convicted?
Well, this is the faith and hope that we put in any jury, whether it's the old jury that we, give them an admonition of what to listen to and what not to listen to in the newspapers and not to talk about it with their spouses, or whether it's the new jury. You give them special instructions as to what to do, as well as all of the information to embolden them and empower them to make the right decision. So hopefully along this process, they will get the information that they need, which that's what the next few weeks are going to bring. So I think that if I were a juror, on the other hand, of the original impaneled jury, that I'd feel a little bit gypped, that I put in all this work and I understand the case and I want to bring some completion because I'm a part of the system, right? This is the system that we have, where you choose people to be a part of the jury, to listen to the case and complete it. But with that in mind, again, the system is set up where you give the right instructions to a jury and hopefully they will make the decision, because that's the system that we have.
Michael Bixon, who do you think has the advantage here? The fact that it's a brand new jury coming in to make this decision?
It's hard to say. I mean, if you were to ask me just based on whether or not they're going to give this guy the death penalty or not, I think it's the defense. I mean, overall, I don't think it's a very solid death penalty case. I mean, obviously, every murder case is terrible. Every murder case is, horrible to watch and hear about. But in the context of what you usually see for a death penalty case, this really doesn't meet those merits. And so I'd be surprised whether they use the old jury or a new jury, that the state is able to meet the burden and the requirements of actually securing that death penalty conviction.
All right, folks, we are tracking this one. And as I said at the top, it's happening this month. Take a look. Florida versus Andre Warner. Sentencing begins on January 19th. January 19th. And of course, we'll continue to stay on top of it. When we come back, it's time to hear from you, the 13th juror. Yesterday, huge decision out in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The DA deciding not to bring any charges against the officers involved in the shooting of Jacob Blake. Your reaction to that decision next.
It is my decision now that I announce today before you that no Kenosha law enforcement officer in this case will be charged with any criminal offense based on the facts and the laws as I will describe them to you now. So it is our decision that no charge will be filed. I'm going to also tell you, just because I think it is important, that no charge will be filed against Jacob Blake in regards to this incident as well. For many of the same reasons, in terms of an overall discussion about this case, that is not something that the District Attorney's Office intends to pursue.
That was the big news late yesterday. The DA in Kenosha, Wisconsin, not pursuing charges in the shooting of Jacob Blake. Remember, he was shot 7 times by police as he was rounding that car and getting into that vehicle. All right, posted this online on Facebook. Incredible reaction from you. We begin with our 13th juror. Comment of the day from Angie, who says, the man refused to cooperate, ran from the cop, and had a knife in his car and was trying to get it. I say it was justified. He shouldn't have ran. And no, it's not a racist comment. I would say the same if he was pink with purple polka dots. The knife was actually in his hand, and that was a big part of the press conference yesterday, 2 hours worth, that he had the knife in his hand And according to the prosecutor, he was turning with that knife at the time that he was shot. Candace, your reaction to the DA making that decision not to pursue charges?
Well, when you look at the law in terms of that particular state, that they were supposed to stop whatever negative events happened by whatever force they needed to. And that's the threshold that they had to meet. And so they were within the law. But with the same token, when we look at the video, and again, we didn't have the official body cam of the police, but when we look at the video that's available to us, we did not see the police say at any time, if you do not put down the knife, then we are going to shoot you. There was no warning, which normally is a process. You give somebody the opportunity to comply or not comply. And so when you look at the 7 gunshot wounds, a lot of things just don't seem to add up. And especially when we look at, and this has to be said, the statistics and the fact that Black people are just 6 times more likely to be shot by the police when they have interactions with them. So while people might think, I'm not saying anything racist, as the viewer or the commenter said, that when we look at the streets and what's going on today, there are implications that you have to look at and look beneath the surface to understand what's going on when people from different races have interaction.
Jim, tonight, this is beyond belief. A sickening, revolting action gone unpunished. It's unbelievable. It continues unabated. Lara, it was a 2-hour press conference yesterday, 2 hours to explain it. They even brought in the use of force expert whose opinion they took into consideration as well.
I understand that. And listen, you watched that video and it's horrific. 7 times the man is shot in his back. But you also look at the facts that led to that. And all we've got is a very short video. And yes, they did put on a full-blown conference explaining it all because they're worried about people's reactions. The problem here is this. Maybe legally it was justified. But there's an undercurrent. There's people protesting, people who are upset because what people are basically trying to say is if this was someone who wasn't Black, if it was a white person, this may not have happened. They may have maybe shot him in the leg. Maybe they would not have shot him 7 times in the back. So, I mean, I could see both sides arguing it, and I understand both sides. From one side, I see why an officer may be concerned. He's got a knife in his hand, but at the same time, he hadn't used the knife. He didn't do anything to them. He was at that point getting into the car and about to leave. He's basically resisting arrest. But an officer is supposed to arrest someone who's got a felony warrant, from what I understood, has a knife in his hand, was in the midst of a domestic violence incident, and that was what the call was about. So, I mean, there are reasons why what happened, but was there a better way to handle this is the bottom line. And I'm sure there was a better way to handle it. It basically is a message for all of us that it's time for us to retrain our officers to learn how to de-escalate these situations and handle them better. And it's time for this department to have what they really needed, the body cams. We needed to see what happened prior to that last moment. Those are very important facts that are missing here.
Yeah.
So
I just want to clarify.
Have to take the DA's word for it.
Yeah. One thing from the press conference yesterday, they said there 3 shots were under the arm on the side, and then 4 were in the back. And the significance of the shots on the side is that they said, according to their investigation, the Jacob Blake was twisting and was turning back towards the officer with that knife in his right hand. So that's the way it was explained during the press conference yesterday. Let's go to John.
It would be interesting as far as when that was happening. Was that after the first 4 shots or before the first 4 the shots in the back?
They said there was no way to determine which shots were first. That would be. They said that would be impossible. John, the police behavior was not racist or aggressive. He gave them no other choice. Michael Bixon, if in fact he's got a knife in his right hand and he's turning towards the officer and he's not complying, what is the other choice the officer has? Is there another one?
There's not much choice in a case like this. Now, whether or not he fired the gun recklessly is a different story. But if you look at law of Tennessee versus Garner, I mean, the officer was within his rights to shoot him. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's resisting fleeing, who assaulted the officer, who already had felony warrants out for him, who's already suspected to be in the commission of a felony. I mean, this is almost like a textbook case for what you would see for, you know, proper use of force.
Thank you, sir. You're out of time. The music, thanks to our guests. Great job. Don't forget to hug the kids.